managing partner of Alaant Workforce Solutions. I'm going to sit because I have 4-inch heels on, and so if I can like avoid standing this whole time, I'll be forever grateful. So what we're going to do this morning is, first of all, so thank you so much for coming. And if you did participate in taking our survey, thank you for that information. Certainly appreciate it, because without your input, this survey really wouldn't have any relevance, and it really wouldn't be here today. So I just want to say thank you for that. We've been doing a survey since 2015, and I'm not going to lie, it's a little bit like pulling teeth every time we do the survey. We oftentimes have to reach out to all of our contacts, all of our clients, and so again, I really appreciate everyone who participated in it, and I'm excited to go through the results. So it's going to be a ton of pie charts for like the first 10 minutes of this, so I promise to try to not put you to sleep, but it's just a visual for you to see what the results were. And then we'll have the panelists come up, and what I want to do is mostly have a conversation about the data and what we're doing in our workforces. So I'll try to get through this as quickly as possible. All right. So this just gives us a breakdown of how many employees in the different organizations actually took part in the survey. So you can see that there was a nice cross-section of, I think, what our region looks like in terms of companies and the number of employees in the organizations. So this was a great statistic. So compared to last year, hiring has actually increased by 56% in the organizations who took the survey. So you'll see that there's almost a tie between no change or it's decreased, but the majority of organizations are still hiring and are hiring more than they did even last year. So if hiring has increased, you can see that it has increased by, the two biggest slivers on here are obviously equally matched. So between 10 and 25%, the hiring has increased year over year. So if it has decreased, it's less than 10%. So we're not talking a decrease of 50% or 30% of workforces. We're talking a very, very small sampling in terms of decreasing. What we've seen in our organization, because obviously we are in the recruiting business, is most companies that we talk to, they're just being a little bit more cautious. So if a position opens in their organization because of a change in status, maybe someone left, maybe there was a termination, instead of a company jumping right back in and saying, oh, we need to refill this position, they're taking a little bit more of a pause to just reevaluate their organization. What is the needs of the company, and what does this role perform? Do they really need it? Can the duties be kind of chunked out or redistributed amongst their current team? That's what we've been seeing the most of. I know nationally we've heard a lot of large enterprise companies, thousands of layoffs happening. That is not happening in our marketplace right now, so that's the good news. This one made me very happy. So I'm just curious in this room, how many people think we're going to have a recession? Okay, good. I agree. But I mean, I think what has happened is do we hear about recession like every single day in the news, every single day on social media, every single day someone is talking about the economy or the lack of the economy or inflation or whatever it might be. So when we asked this question, I was very happy to see that companies felt the same way that we feel, and that everyone in this room feels, that a possible recession right now isn't reducing hiring plans. I will tell you though, I think in the beginning of the year, we had a little dip in activity within our office, and I think it was because we got hammered so much, especially in the beginning of the year, about inflation and all of the things that were happening. And so I did notice that many companies were actually kind of, again, they were pulling back just a little bit, they were being a little bit more cautious. Maybe it's the spring weather, we all love spring and summer in New York, we've got vacations coming, everybody's like feeling a little bit more energized. And so like April and May, we actually saw a huge uptick in our office in terms of companies needing assistance with hiring. And so again, this is exactly what we're seeing in our organization. So for 2023, The majority of organizations were very optimistic about job growth to continue in their organization for the rest of this year. And then 14% actually were very optimistic. So again, still, I think, still in keeping. What I've also noticed in our marketplace, I mean, my team and I, we're talking to employers of all sizes, of all industries on a daily basis. And it just depends. It just depends on the industry, who's struggling a little bit, who's excelling, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. When I talk to my counterparts in other organizations that provide recruiting and staffing to their clients across the state of New York, they're seeing the same exact thing. So a lot of times when I talk to my peers in the staffing industry and I say, well, how's it going? I get the same comment all the time. It's weird. It's just weird right now. And I'm like, yeah, I think it is a little weird right now. So, but still, this is very optimistic information. So here is an interesting one. We asked organizations where they're the fastest growing number of job opportunities. And you'll see there's a huge 54% of other. So I was like, well, crap. What does that mean? Well, luckily we did ask people what other was, and I'll share that with you in a second. But although it seems like it's less impressive, information technology and healthcare are also very fast-growing industries. But here's the sampling of other. So anyone who filled this out, we asked them, well, what are the jobs if you click other? Ton of administrative roles. Call center, support. I wouldn't call caregiving in an administrative, but people were listing caregiving. They were also listing social work, but for the majority of that administrative category, it was those office positions that are supporting a function, whether it's a call center, administrative assistant, or some type of customer service. There was a huge swath of that. There was also a lot of accounting, finance, and banking across the board, from tellers to executive level. We were seeing a lot of people answer that question as well as accounting and finance related roles. Legal was also mentioned, creative and marketing was mentioned several times, sales was mentioned, but to be completely honest with you, the biggest other in the other category was the last one that's listed here. It was everything from warehouse workers to laborers to truckers. Multiple people said mechanical and electrical technicians, maintenance, janitorial staff, warehouse, construction workers. So there's a demand for bodies for all of these roles, from high-end to entry-level in all industries. So over the next 6 months, the respondents said that their organization expects hiring to continue to be either challenging or a significant challenge. Most said challenging. That's a little bit lower as compared to 2022. It was probably more evenly split between significant challenge and challenge. So, but it's still running the same way. But here's the biggest reason why. So it is mostly salary, wage, and lack of people being available for the roles. So skills gap, labor shortage, salary and wage demands, those are the biggest areas. I mean, that's what we're seeing. How many people are seeing that in our organizations right now? Yeah, there's, you know, a lot of times people will say to me, and I know you guys have all heard this, nobody wants to work anymore. It's like, no, everybody's working. There's no one else available anymore. That's the difference. So we also, this year is the first time that we actually expanded the survey results outside of the capital region. Usually it's in the 518 area code. So we went a little bit outside of the region, but 83% of the respondents were in the 518. The other 17 were still in the state. So I think it's still a good representation of our local market. So here was an interesting one. Most companies are still recruiting all of their employees from within the region. Now, in many of the positions that we just looked at, it makes a lot of sense. You can't really have a remote laborer or a remote truck driver. You can have a remote accountant, potentially legal, potentially definitely creative and marketing. We're seeing all of those jobs turn into more remote and hybrid type of organizations. But for the most part, people are recruiting within the region, and there's actually a nice handful of people that are still recruiting with a mix of inside and outside of the region, depending upon what their needs are. I know I've talked to a lot of organizations that, depending upon the role, depending upon their organization, they are a little bit more open to it, but the majority are still like, we must want them in the region. And I think they want them in the region because, if the next slide is what I think it is, it's the remote option. So a lot of times I think when we thought of remote work before the pandemic, we thought of remote work as I hired a skilled IT person that lived in Texas for my role here in Albany. That has completely shifted and changed. Remote work is now, I live in Albany and I work remotely a couple of days a week. I live in Schenectady and my job's in Troy, and I can, come and go or work a couple of days at home type of a thing. So you'll see on here that there's still a lot of people who are not open to hiring remote employees. But if they're local, they're a little bit more open to it, and about 37% are actually doing it. And what I tell employers when they talk to us about this is there are implications of remote workers. There's not to mention the tax implications and the management implications if they're not more centrally located to your office. But it is more difficult to hire remote employees or manage remote employees. It actually takes a lot more work for managers and leaders of your organization. And I can see a huge trend, I actually am seeing it already, in training that management pool on how to manage remote workers. Because it does take a different skill set. I think it's harder to manage remote workers. I don't think it's impossible, but I do think it's harder. So, and I think a lot of organizations are grappling with this as well. I also think there's a lot of brick and mortar around here, and as in anywhere. And so if a person has invested in their building, they want to make sure people are using their building. So there's a lot of factors at play here. So we asked, because we're like, okay, if you're recruiting, how are you getting people to come to your organization? So we did ask about increasing compensation to attract and retain employees. And as you can see, many are increasing their salaries. Also, a lot of people are increasing salaries and other financial incentives like sign-on bonuses, referral bonuses, those types of things. And here is an interesting one. I was talking to someone before we started this, and they were asking about this. How much of your staff is working either remotely or hybrid? And 56% of organizations are saying that more than 50% of their staff works remotely or in a hybrid type model. But then, of course, 40% is not doing that at all. And then we asked, of course, if you remember, will you mandate an in-office work policy for 2023? The good news is most people are still saying, nope, we're going to remain in this hybrid structure going forward. And then you'll see, some are still thinking about it, about 10%, and 28% of businesses said, yep, we've already gone back to full-time in the office. What I like to describe to most organizations when we talk about this hot topic is most people, say all people, most people are interested in flexibility. So it's not necessarily working from home all the time. It's the flexibility that they need in their schedules to be able to do life. And so working from home is almost, I don't want to say this negatively, but it's like a mask for that. Because when you work from home, you don't feel like someone's looking over your shoulder. You can kind of ebb and flow based on what your needs are. You're getting your work done, but you're also taking care of things you have to take care of. And so when you're talking or thinking about this in your organizations, if you can do it, consider it. And I don't mean that hybrid remote is the only way to do it. You might need to consider different work shifts or different job sharing type of assignments or whatever it might be that you can offer more flexibility. Because the other push and pull that I see in organizations are either one, nobody in the office can work remote, or in the job can work remote because of the nature of the work. That's a huge sticking point. So I think there's going to be a little bit more rift happening in society between those who work in the office and those who don't work in an office. The other thing I think you're going to see is some organizations, and I can use my husband as an example, he has a job that he has to work on site. There's no physical way he can do this job without being on site. But he works in an organization where 50% of the employees can work from home because they're in sales-related jobs or administrative-related jobs. And so there's a little bit of this going on in that organization because it's not fair. Most of it's coming from my husband bitching and complaining about it, but that's aside from here. But it's a real situation that employers are going to have to address if they haven't done it already. There has to be something done or considered when it comes to your people who do have to be on the road or in the office and just the nature of their work. So something to think about. That is the end of the survey. So that's the board pie chart section of it. But overall, I didn't know what the survey was going to look like when we did it. I thought maybe the results would be a little bit more pessimistic than they actually are. I will tell you the biggest difference was when we did the survey in December, about 75% of organizations were very optimistic about hiring in 2023. And as you can see from one of the first few slides, that did decrease into the 50s. But overall, everybody is still hiring. The good news for me is everybody's still having challenges hiring because that's our business. So that's good for us. But, I think the conversations about recession or the conversations about hybrid work and all of those types of things are just still very much in the forefront of everybody's brain. So what I'd love to do now is actually bring up our panelists so we can talk about the survey results and what are they seeing in their organizations. So Aileen, Matt, and Nick, if you guys can all come up and I'll join you. I'm still seated, of course.
We thought you were standing the whole time.
Well, I'm not.
I'm going to stick you in the middle.
So guys, can you first start by just introducing yourselves, your titles, and your organizations? And Matt will start with you.
First off, thank you, Mary, for the opportunity to speak. This is going to be a lot of fun. I'm Matt Grattan. I'm the manager of workforce development at Plum Power. I paid her to be here.
Can I get one of those? I'm Aileen Flach. I'm the VP of HR for DeCrescente Distributing Co.
Absolutely.
Good morning, I'm Nick Sestito. I am managing partner of TJ Electrical Associates. Come on, Nick.
So, from a size business, how many people are at Plum Power now?
Globally, 4,000.
How many are in this area?
1,100-ish.
Wow. It's more than I thought. Wow.
And increasing daily.
How about at DeCrescente?
We have about 425 employees now, kind of incremental, small growth year over year.
And Nick?
We're at about 60 right now.
Okay, so we have a nice cross-section of small, mid, and large, for our standards of the region. So my first question for all of you, and we'll start with you, Matt, just because you're closest to me, and I'll bounce around. What were because you guys, they did get a sneak peek of the results ahead of time, you can take a look at it. What were your impressions of that? Is it reflective of what you're seeing in your workplace?
I think absolutely. We are still very optimistic about hiring and growth. However, are we beginning to take a look more strategically at hiring positions to say, all right, is this an absolute necessity position that we have to backfill or fill? Yes, we are doing that, and we have not done that in the last probably 2 to 3 years. Just to give you a point of reference, the beginning of the pandemic, we were 700 employees. We're now 4,000. So when you grow that quickly and you're growing globally, it's an interesting dichotomy. But yeah, I think the results are right in line with how we're approaching hiring and what we're looking at strategically to really just, I won't say, we've kind of used the term, pumping the brakes a bit, just to kind of see and reassess where we are. We're a publicly traded company, so we also have obligations to our investors as well, and so we continue to look at revenue versus cost and expenses and evaluate that. And while, I found personally the recession question very interesting, because I was wondering the timing of how as we were going through this whole debt ceiling negotiation, and how and if that had any impact. It didn't seem to on the question around recession. But all economists were pointing to, if we didn't get that deal, oh my God, we were going to go into immediate recession. So interesting.
Was anybody scared about that? Is anybody like, get your shit together? I was like yelling at the TV every morning. I was like, I can't watch the news anymore. I just have to turn it off.
It's depressing.
Yes. Oh, but that would be a whole other panel. Right?
Yes.
What about at DeCrescente?
So there's a few different variables, and I think our organizations all have them. We're a family-owned business with very engaged family leadership at the helm. So I've been there for almost 11 years, and I would say our ownership has been very involved in any growth, any refilling of positions, any reorganization that we do internally. So anytime a position opens up that is not a labor position, it gets a look, and is this the time to make a change? And sometimes we do make those changes. And I think that if our general manager was sitting here today, he would say, 10 years ago, distribution was distribution, but now we are kind of evolving into the logistics business, really.
Yeah.
We've changed our themes lately over the years, so we don't just distribute beer anymore, although we happily bring beer to the masses daily. We've also branched out into wine and spirits, salty snacks, so any Corona or Miller Lite or Heineken that you have in the Capital District has come through. And now, so have any Wise Snacks or Saratoga chips or things like that. Right. Okay. So we've kind of pushed the edges of our business, and that has required us to kind of keep up with ourselves from a management perspective. So we're very hands-on with the change. And every time an opportunity comes up, there's a lot of eyeballs on it. There's my long-winded answer for your short question.
No. How about you, Nick?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's, pretty reflective of the times we're in. Ultimately, I think hiring in 2023 has been a little easier for us. Working with Amy and Nick, very closely over the past year. And the end of 2022 was rough. The candidate pool is shallow. It seems to be deepening, and we're getting good results, quicker than we were before, which is refreshing. Unfortunately, the 17 other layers in what it takes to get somebody onboarded and, productive, vehicles and tools, equipment, and these things that we need are still kind of backing that process up. So it's not necessarily getting the person that's difficult, it's all the other aspects of the position. Kind of get them, like I said, fully 100% and productive. But overall, I think the survey was accurate.
Talk to me or us about I'm curious about the salary question. So I'll start with you, Nick. In terms of the salary, what have you done or what have you seen with your existing employees and employees that prospective employees that you might be considering for your organization? Are you doing the same thing when it comes to making the job more attractive by increasing salaries? So what are you doing about that question, I guess?
So salary, we haven't really adjusted. And it's funny because the last few interviews that I've had, we will, myself and the manager for whatever division is meeting with the candidate, go through the role, and the first question is always, what's the culture like? You just puked all this information on about what they have to do all day, every day, and the first question is, what's the culture like? And from my perspective, that stuff is becoming a little bit more important than the salary. How much time do I get off? If my kids are sick, can I come in late and, is that all right? There's the flexibility portion. And my one worry with that in the state of the country is we want everything we want more, we want faster, we want it all the time, but our workforce isn't mirroring that. We're kind of, we want that flexibility. We want to be able to be out of the office more, to jockey the kids to school and do stuff like that. That's my one concern with, the workforce as a whole, as it seems. Our demand is higher than ever, but we want to kind of have, I don't want to say less of an output, but be more flexible. And I don't know if those two are going to run,
Right.
parallel.
So the flexibility could challenge productivity from that
believe it will,
perspective.
yeah.
Interesting. What are you guys doing? What are you seeing?
So we have actually pushed our pays in a lot of areas. So we have a pretty large blue collar workforce, and merchandisers putting beer on shelves were making maybe $15 an hour 2 summers ago, and now they're making $22 and $23 an hour this year. So our warehouse employees is very competitive. So we don't have a lot of direct, we have some direct competition in the beverage industry in our backyard, but we're competing for drivers, warehouse personnel, and they have a lot of opportunities around us. So we are often looking at pay. Every few months we're looking at pay for our blue collar roles. And our sales employees, we've increased those pays. And when we've had to replace some more administrative positions, I think hiring managers have found themselves stung a couple times when they have seen that the market is now demanding in order to fill a position. And layer on top of that we have an expectation that you're in person. It is a grind sometimes to fill some of their positions. So we have absolutely floated pay multiple times in the past couple of years. So
Yeah, I mean, just what you said between 15 and 22, and that's like the last 2 years. It's significant.
Right.
Significant. Yes, absolutely. What about a plug?
Is that why my beer is more expensive?
But it tastes so good. Just adjust it, the kids don't eat. That's right. Yeah. Fruits and
College
vegetables.
tuition.
Yeah. It's all about balance.
Exactly. I think same situation. We're continuously evaluating our comp schedules. We have a compensation committee. We do have a position of director of total awards that specifically is looking at the continuum and the entirety of the compensation package piece. I mean, like Aileen, I'll probably focus more on our technical workforce and our technician workforce. I think that's really where the question is probably geared to, because you could get into looking at our engineering positions and all of our administrative and office positions, and I don't think it's as pertinent as a discussion. What we've done at Plug is it has been a challenge for us to continue to maybe necessarily increase at the rate that DeCrescente has, because again, publicly traded company, we're continuing to look at expenses versus revenue. And it's well publicized as large and as dynamic of an organization as we are. We still are not profitable as an organization, so we continue to strive for that. But what we have done with our technical workforce is undertaken a fairly sizable exercise to really expand our career pathway and our technician tier structure, so that we can articulate to the technicians more of, okay, this is your starting rate, and we feel it's a competitive starting rate. We are continuing to analyze that. We start our techs at about 18 to 19, but through progression tier structures, which we're reevaluating and in deepening. We were a little flat where we only had like three levels in our technician tier structure. We're moving now to more of a 5 to 6 level tier structure that will clearly articulate a path for growth. What are the types of training and credentials? That's a lot of what my role is as a workforce development manager, is to be able to articulate what are those training and credentials and the demonstration of certain competencies and skills to be able to get to those levels that will get you to a wage of 28, 29, 30 and above. And then if you want to move into, with tuition reimbursement, a position possibly in engineering or whatnot, how is that done? So we've been looking at more of trying to articulate a pathway for growth. we know, maybe, it depends, you talk to some in the organization, they feel maybe we're a little lower than we should be. You talk to our director of total rewards, he says, we're right where we should be. Gee, coincidence. But I think we continue to have productive dialogue around that, but I think the articulation of the pathway to demonstrate growth, I mean, that to me is key, to be able to articulate, especially, our technical workforce, they need to see what the growth trajectory looks like.
So I just want to also say, please feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions. Certainly we can take questions at the end, but I always hate questions at the end because everybody's like, oh, I had a question, they kept talking and now I forgot it. So anybody have any questions at this point? So can we talk a little bit about recruitment strategies? So I think we all agree that hiring is difficult. Nick was mentioning that the talent pool's gotten a little easier this year. Have you seen the same at DeCrescente and Plug? I mean, what, for your respective businesses, how deep is your talent pool that you're seeing so far? Toe deep?
Sometimes it feels like it's toe deep. So what I would say is that I feel like maybe we're a little used to being disappointed by the labor pool right now, and I've just kind of accepted that it is what it is. We have definitely put a lot more, I think, in-person hustle into recruiting events and job fairs and being out in the public and being in customer accounts recruiting and spending money on the radio and spending money on Indeed, and we have an amazing communications manager who manages our social media, and he's been a really helpful source of kind of energy for us. So I think that we're in good shape right now in terms of our company headcount. And we have anticipated turnover and overhired in some places and are kind of really, I think where we need to be going into the busyness of the summer. But it was through hard work and sheer dint of will to just get people. So it's been a real concerted effort and grind and kind of, I don't know, team effort to get us to that point this year. So, and in some cases, it takes a little bit longer, or we are considering people who might be maybe not where we would want them to be in the career path. We might be advancing them, getting them specialized training and moving them faster than we might otherwise, but we're figuring it out, I think, in an okay place right now.
When I hear you saying that it's all hands on deck to get up to staffing, what is management actually giving up doing to spend that extra time helping recruit?
Giving up extra time, consultation, willingness to allow us to spend, try new things. We wouldn't be typically present on the radio, for example. But, when people were coming to us and saying, we might as well give it a shot. We might as well give it a shot to go to television, to advertise with Spectrum Reach, to do stuff with different sources than we used to. But I think everybody recognized the need to do whatever it took. So there was very little pushback. So they're willing to give up. Well, that hasn't worked for us in the past. We're okay, well, let's try it again.
Absolutely, there are no failures, only lessons, and if you don't learn the lesson, you have to repeat it.
Right.
But to rephrase that in just a short way, if you're spending all this time on recruiting initial, are you spending less time on interviews or job evaluations with current employees? Are you neglecting them in some way?
So I'm fortunate for the size of our company to have 2 dedicated recruiters on my team who are hiring all the time. And we are so accustomed in our business to seasonality and expectations that this time of year is going to be really hard. That when people have to give us extra energy, give us extra hours, give us extra time, do whatever it takes to meet this applicant in Fulton County at 6 a.m. on a Saturday, we do it. So,
So it's outside of regular hours?
yes, oh yes.
It
for
sounds
sure.
like that would happen.
Huh?
Would that actually happen?
It happens
Yeah,
like, it happens regular. It happens regular.
I mean, not for nothing, newsflash for everybody, if more organizations were willing to do that,
Yeah.
there would be less need for a company like Alaant, who does that on your behalf.
Right.
And that's definitely the case. I find that, it's interesting, a lot of organizations complain, like we talked earlier about no one wants to work. Well, you're doing the same thing, expecting different results. You're not changing anything up in any way.
Yeah.
And, when we get brought into the mix, sometimes, we can produce candidates fairly quickly and there's
Yeah.
companies are surprised.
Right.
And we're like, we just did it different. We just have updated our ways and our methodologies that most companies are reluctant to do. So you're an example of the opposite of that, which is great.
Well, candor is a company value. So if you expect me to hustle, I expect you to hustle.
Right.
And I think and that's communicated, respectfully and with great affection. But it's a thing, because we're all trying to get to the same place, so.
What about at Plug? How's the talent pool?
I think like Nick, there are some positive trends that I'm seeing in the area of other in the survey.
Yeah.
We were looking at that industrial area, which you said was the
I mean, it was
biggest area.
54%, I think is what it
Yeah.
said on there. I was like,
For those of us that hire, technician talent, the trades, and again, and Nick has hopefully seen it. I think it's the greatest news that I can portray and announce is, last year, Capital Region BOCES built a brand new career and technical education center that immensely expanded their capacity to bring in CTE students from the 24 component school districts. They're already at capacity with wait lists in every program. I never thought, before I retired, I would hear the day when we're seeing more kids begin to start looking at and choosing career and technical education as a viable pathway. Now, you can go down, various paths. To answer your question here, I think we're seeing a slightly better talent pool. Some of that will start to hopefully even get better as more and more students continue to explore these alternative pathways to careers. Because again, we feel there's with programs that we have like in tuition reimbursement and registered apprenticeship. We were just part of a big announcement yesterday that New York creates, and at Plug we had the U.S. Department of Labor Assistant Secretary for the Employment and Training Administration here in Albany, trying to see some of the things that we're doing in expanding registered apprenticeships. That's another big area where we are making a diligent effort to be able to the point that Aileen made, to really look at individuals that traditionally we might not say have the prerequisite skills or the skills and competencies that we'd be looking for to make an offer to. But in the nature of this labor market, you've got to be willing to lower your requirements in some instances. But we can't afford to then say, well, we're going to allow you to lower your expectations. They still need to produce, they still need to deliver. So how do we strategically think about ways to do that? Registered apprenticeship is a great way to do that. And oh, by the way, the federal government is just throwing money to incentivize the creation and use of apprenticeship programs. These apprentices don't pay a dime for their related instruction in community colleges. In some instances, we can even get reimbursement of a portion of their salary through grant programs through the State Department of Labor. So we're trying to be very creative in looking at all these different recruiting components. And when we talk about recruitment, I'll break it down into short-term and long-term recruitment as well. I think there's a big emphasis in career exploration that I'm seeing start to percolate as well in the high schools. If you haven't been to the local event Career Jam, I encourage you all to attend that event. 1,200 to 1,500 8th and 9th grade students come in and There are booths set up, and students get to touch and feel careers, which is stuff that they do not get to do in a traditional classroom. I think that is starting to help, fan the flame of this interest in career and technical education. So it's still difficult, don't get me wrong, but I think we see some promise as it relates to that. And again, if we can articulate what those pathways look like, then we're seeing more parents and students say, yes, this is a viable option.
So T&J Electric, so I'm assuming you have electricians. How's the electrician labor market?
So we're a union contractor, and we cover 9 states, so we utilize a lot of locals. It's more difficult than I would say a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And we're kind of in a have to grow what you need scenario as well. Well, he's here, he's healthy, he's going to show up every day. Let's see what he can do and kind of learn him what we need to learn him. And there's a lot more of that effort going in than we've ever had to do. And I feel like our field staff, obviously, we're all paying union scale, so they're paid what they're going to be paid. I can't do anything about that. We can go over, but we can't go under. So we're taking people that necessarily don't have the skills that they need for the positions that we have to fill, and we're just doing the best we can to train them to do that. We're a little bit different. We wired this building. We've recently gotten out of the large construction projects, and we're just focusing on retail maintenance, which has kind of spread us out in a 9-state footprint right now. So to your point earlier, it is much more difficult managing employees from that distance.
Yeah.
They're remote, but they're not really remote. I mean, they're going on site and working, in a Target or a Walmart or a CVS, but to our corporate office, they're remote. So there's a lot of interesting intricacies of it. And I think ultimately, to answer your question, it's more difficult now than it was a few years ago to find people to fit, that mold.
Yeah.
So we're kind of, like I said, putting much more effort into making them fit it.
Yeah. Oh boy. Lauren.
How much would you say, for each of you, the culture, like the DNA of what the company is, has helped you get a little bit more competitive than in a very competitive hiring?
For us, it's huge.
Yeah.
It comes right from our CEO, Andy Marsh. He is a huge proponent of our culture. We are still very much a hybrid work environment. We have a beautiful, brand new administrative office building at 8 British American Boulevard that at times, I sit here and say, it's 50% full, but he's willing to make that event because he understands the flexibility of remote and hybrid work, and that people have a lot. But our culture is very focused around an entrepreneurial spirit. As we continue to grow, very much entrepreneurial, innovative, trust. We have a value that a lot of our employees seem to gravitate to, and Amanda could probably relate to this one as well, that we refer to as humble but gutsy. Because a lot of the things that we're doing haven't been done before in terms of really trying to build out a green hydrogen ecosystem and what that means. So culture is absolutely fundamental. Andy has a all-employee meeting every week with the entire workforce over Zoom, and every week he starts off with a song that he picks that has some sort of theme related to it, and then restates the values of our culture. So
Is he singing this song,
embedded.
or is it just
right, if it's a Springsteen song, maybe a little bit, but usually not. It's a video. Yeah, he starts out with starts out with playing a music.
Awesome.
Just a
mood thing.
Yeah.
I mean, music is absolutely.
Yeah, and then he takes requests sometimes too, and it's kind of neat, but very much culture is huge.
Yeah, I wanted to be like 101%. To answer your question, our culture is probably the #1 source of pride in the organization. If anybody here has met CJ DeCrescente, he's I would describe him as like a super coaching presence. So very, and I use the word hustle again, very into, when you win, we all win. We're here to win. lots of grit, lots of hustle, lots of do whatever it takes to kind of push us across the line. So the culture is a big, and it's a big selling point in our organization. I don't think we would be here today successful in this environment where opportunities for workplaces that are more kind of open to flexibility and hybrid arrangements and remote arrangements. I don't think we would be as successful as we are if that culture of the way we do things here was not so clear and embraced by the people who are there.
I agree, it's very important for us as well, you know, circling back to the union employees, they could go to work for anybody and make the same amount of money they're making with me, you know, so making it a fun, you know, all times demanding environment because we service retail clients, you know, the Walmarts and Targets and those guys of the world, they don't want to wait for anything or anyone ever. So I always tell them, like, the work is going to suck sometimes, right? It's just going to suck. It's going to be in the middle of the night, it's going to be cold, it's going to be whatever. But all we can do is make the environment, you know, as fun and easygoing as possible. And I think that's why we have such good retention. Because the business is what the business is. You know, it's 24/7. And if you're not doing something to offset that, you know, it's just not going to work.
Yeah, it's, when you said the suck, my husband's a Navy guy, and he was floored the other day when I said, you have to embrace the suck. And he was like, oh my God, I can't believe you just said that.
Yeah.
But I think there's something too, like if we're all embracing it together and we're all doing it, and like you were saying, like, you know, we're all pushing, if I'm hustling, you're freaking hustling too, right?
Exactly.
So, Rob.
So Nick actually just hit a little bit on it. I'd be interested in all of you talk about, so we spend most of our time talking about recruiting, but sort of retention is the other side of that. So what has your experience been lately as far as retaining and developing the people who are, so obviously that puts a lot, the better you do at that, the less pressure it puts on getting the new ones. And it's a lot easier sometimes keeping your good ones than it is finding another good one.
So he took my question.
I was gonna say, I noticed that.
Perfect.
I noticed that.
Well done, sir.
That guy can get out of here.
No, that's exactly it. Go ahead. Nick, go ahead. Yeah, you go.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I just touched on it a little bit. It's super important because, and you always, you know, read the articles now, you know, if it's gonna cost you $5,000 to give somebody a raise and a pat on the back, or the extra week of vacation that they want, what's it gonna cost to hire somebody else? Let alone the time and the effort and the energy to train them and find them and do all that. So yeah, I mean, it's very important. Short answer. And I think in our experience, you know, we have very low turnover, coupled with, you know, 25 to 30% growth year over year for the last 2 years. So I think that's, you know, pretty good. And all of our management team is very like-minded, you know, in the hustle. You know, perfect example. What we do a lot of for all of our larger clients is 24/7 emergency generator service. So if a price shopper loses power, whatever time, you know, our guys are going, hooking up the generator, getting it going, because they're going to lose their product in 4 hours. You know, we don't want all beer to sit there. But you know, that call will come to me at 3 a.m. and I'm calling guys, and you know, in my small company, you know, I'm at the top, and I think it helps the guys in the field knowing that they're gonna, if they need help, they can reach any of the management team at any time of the day, and we're all gonna be there. And I think that kind of ties in with that team atmosphere and helps with retention. You know, they're not just gonna get, you know, a voicemail. Someone's gonna pick up and help them and achieve the product, you know, sell the product.
And I think in our organization, it's been a much more candid conversation in the past couple of years because employees have been harder to get. So then the conversation becomes like, if we're killing ourselves to get people, I hope you're killing yourself to keep them. So, of course, we do this in a, you know, nice way. So, for example, candidly, yeah. So, for example, today, our training and development manager and our recruiters are doing a Zoom training with managers to remind them, as we're going into the hardest time of the year, you know, how to recognize, reward, and retain all of our people. Because the dynamic that turnover throws into the mix when we're really busy. It's just like, it becomes an impossible thing to catch up with. So I mentioned before that we have kind of overhired in some positions because we are trying to anticipate and mitigate some of the churn in the business and the negative impact that can have on our continuity of our business. So we are having those conversations. Because I think in the past it was like a transactional thing to fill an opening. You just come to HR and you fill out a ticket and they're get you a person, and it was like, well, it's the impact across the board when you lose somebody is so severe. Especially in entry-level positions, because you kind of feel like you never catch up with yourself then. So this has been an ongoing conversation, more of an expectation for managers to be looking at their retention strategies. We're seeing, we do check-ins with our new employees at 30 days, at 90 days, at 180 days, and we're looking, kind of escalating the topics along as we're checking in with them. Looking at a more active stay interview process to see if we can capture people who might be a flight risk before they actually fly. And I think that from the top of the organization, there's been a charge to put your arms around your people. So this happens to be our 75th anniversary year. So we also have just a lot of activities going on for employees. Friday, we're taking everybody to the Great Escape. There's picnics and rallies and happy hours and things like that. And so the more we do that stuff, the more we hope people engage and enjoy.
Yeah, to me, it's the secret sauce, right? It's from a talent acquisition, workforce development perspective. As a workforce practitioner, we've always said, okay, get them trained, get them into a job, and then your job's done. Your job's just begun, to be honest with you, and the hardest part of the job is, there are also, from Plug's perspective, numerous programs that we're working with the federal government on, that are programs that were part of the bipartisan infrastructure bill or the Inflation Reduction Act that have specific requirements that we be reaching into communities, disadvantaged communities, communities of color, minorities, and getting them the skills necessary to work in the renewable energy field. So we have to have these types of programs and resources in place because they're going to bring certain barriers. So we're looking very heavily at barrier remediation initiatives and programs. And one of the programs I've been familiar with in my previous career that I'm a huge advocate for and we're in the midst of beginning to implement is the Employer Resource Network at Plug, which is run by Schenectady ARC, where you pay a portion, what's called a share of a success coach that actually pushes on-site and handles barrier remediation for our employees on their lunch hour, on their break. Because I'll be honest with you, in many instances, HR, we're not equipped to, when the employee says, I've transitioned off of social services and I'm late on my national grid bill, I'm about to have my utility shut off. I have to go take care of that, so I need to leave. HR doesn't know how to handle that. But if we can say, well, go see the success coach, they'll make an appointment with National Grid for you and they'll try to work out a payment schedule or whatnot. And we can keep that employee. That's huge. So just trying to think and understand what are the tools in the toolbox around retention. I think all of us probably do a lot of the components around, social get-togethers and things like that, but also trying to think strategically some really great programs that are evidence-based that enable us to show that, we want to retain our workforce.
Any other questions? We have 3 minutes left. And if you guys know me, I'm on time. Yes, Mr. Shin, don't be too long-winded.
Right? I'll make the question go 2.5 minutes. You talk about diverse populations, and this thought popped into my head about justice-served candidates and what you're seeing across the board about bringing them as a candidate pool. Not the expert, we're not talking about that, right? But there are other candidates in the marketplace that are now getting more attention, more opportunities. What are you guys seeing?
Yeah, I know we are being approached by we have a fair population of immigrants and refugees that are working on our manufacturing floor, that we're continuing to look at, English language training so that they can work safely and understand and read our SOPs and components like that. We're seeing them come from, more and different backgrounds and countries. We're even starting to see some of the Ukrainian population start to come in. So we've been working with the Center for Economic Growth, and they've been connecting us a lot to some of the refugee center programs in the region. There's big environmental justice 40 initiatives with all these federal investments. 40% of these investments need to flow to disadvantaged communities. So, we have to clearly demonstrate that we have a plan and how we're addressing this. So we can't just, talk the talk. It's not anecdotal. Yeah, I think it's part of what we need to do to also, give back and provide these individuals an opportunity. So it makes good business sense. We need these people. As Miriam said, the demographics are shrinking. So they're coming here to work. Let's provide them the tools and resources to be successful.
So we're kind of just embarking on different diversity initiatives that I think are going to hopefully kind of inform the organization about things we can do better. In terms of working with people who might have criminal history, things like that, everything is kind of case by case in that scenario because the state liquor authority has some kind of input into who we hire and who we cannot. If you ever want to read some antiquated laws, go look into the state's liquor laws. So we have some imposed limitations on us. So we're kind of like turning over every stone where we can make an opportunity work. We're trying to do that.
We're in a similar situation just because of where the job of the technician puts them physically. They're in pharmacies, they're in cash offices, things like that. And our clientele, has most of them have strict background check policies, and so our hands are kind of tied in that respect. But not to make a joke of it, but the construction industry has historically had a rougher crowd, right? So that's kind of been there a little bit already. So it hasn't really changed much, for us in the last few years.
And with that, I'm going to say thank you to you guys for spending some time with us this morning and sharing some insights on what you're doing in your organizations. I didn't even get to one of my questions, but that's okay. Your question was good too. So we'll give our panelists a nice round.